Hello and welcome to another edition of Stringham Real Estate Edge. As we all know, a new prison is being constructed here in Salt Lake City. The question is, what's going to become of the old prison's massive land site? Here to answer some of these questions is our guest, Alan Matheson, Executive Director of Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. Alan, thank you for being with us. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Gary. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Indeed. Alan, let's start with just kind of a definition. What is the purpose and function of the Mountain State Land Authority?
The legislature created the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority in 2018 as the entity that would oversee the planning and redevelopment of the Draper prison site. So it's overseen by a board of 11 that are appointed by the governor and president of the Senate, speaker of the House. It includes 4 legislators, 2 local mayors, heads of a couple of key state agencies, and some private sector representation.
Do you have a timeline under which you are expected to accomplish your task?
We don't. The legislature has not set a specific timeline. A lot of that will be driven, of course, by market realities.
Sure.
We do want to move forward and make progress and be able to create the significant benefits that this site promises. But we want to do it in a thoughtful way. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, we do it right more than that we do it fast.
Sure. Can you give us a little more detail about the project? What does it include? How big is the site itself? What are some of the particulars?
Right. Well, the site itself is about 608 acres and currently occupied by the Utah State Prison. That prison will likely move in about a year, and that'll open up the opportunity for us to start the redevelopment. We've got some marching orders from the legislature. They want us to achieve a number of objectives, and those objectives were actually set out through public process and then incorporated into legislation. And it includes things like advancing workforce development, creating jobs, having a world-class transit system. It talks about improving air quality and reducing resource use, having a place that has a balance of different development types.
Sure.
And
all
also
worthwhile undertakings.
All good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you tell us specifically, is it only the 600 acres or is there additional property that will be incorporated as time goes on?
I think there's a possibility that some of the surrounding state properties could be included, but at this point, it's limited to that 608 acre parcel.
Can you give us an idea, or is it too early? Is this a commercial, residential, or retail undertaking?
It's going to be all the above.
All the above.
So we look at this as a mixed-use community. There will be office, commercial, retail, residential. But one of the areas of focus is really to make this an innovation community, a place where there's a culture of creativity, where we will be bringing in talent from around the world, setting up incubators, accelerators, and systems that will allow these smart people to get together and help solve some of the problems and challenges in our community.
Sure. Well, that certainly sounds exciting. Give us an idea how long the study has been underway.
Well, you can start by looking way back to the times when the first discussions about moving the prison started, and that was, over a decade ago. But there was a group called the Point of the Mountain Development Commission that, again, created by the legislature, that was operating from 2016 to 2018 to conduct a public process. Reached out to thousands of Utahns.
And public process, you mean public input?
Public input.
Communication with a variety of stakeholders.
Exactly. Workshops, taking ideas, analyzing them, and trying to determine what the best development pattern for the broader Point of the Mountain area is. So think Sandy to Saratoga Springs.
Sure.
Then the legislature took the output from that process, created the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, and so we've been operating really over the last couple of years. And think about it, the development process, in maybe kind of 3 phases. One is visioning, creating a vision for the site. Next is planning, and third will be implementation. So we currently are in that planning stage. And we've hired SOM, Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, really a nationally, internationally recognized architecture design planning firm. And they're going through an accelerated and aggressive schedule to develop a framework master plan for this site within the next couple of months.
You've indicated that this is state property, but yet you also indicated that there were 2 or 3 other cities, at least, maybe 1 or 2 of the counties involved. So it sounds like more of a total community involvement. But eventually, who will make the final call? Is it the state?
Yeah, so the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority Board has been tasked with making the decisions on this site. They have land use authority and certainly need to coordinate with surrounding communities. This site is all within Draper. It's adjacent to Bluffdale. You mentioned counties and regional transportation entities all need to work together. But while the authority board is going to be making the decisions, it really is important that this be a public project. We recognize that this is state land, so all Utah residents are owners of this site. We need to make sure that it provides a return economically and in terms of quality of life to the people of Utah.
Indeed.
And so we've tried to reach out broadly. We've involved about 10,000 people over the last year in working groups, stakeholder advisory committee, surveys, public open houses, and really want to make sure that we are listening closely to the people affected by this development.
You've given us an idea about the process. It sounds like there's been a lot of input collected, analyzed. Where are you finally? You indicated that you're within a couple of months, perhaps, of having the master plan completed. And if that's the case, then it'll be shared with the public, online public distribution. Is that kind of the process?
It will be. This has been really an open process, and we've had a number of public meetings along the way to inform the effort. But our planners started in January, gathered information, developed different alternatives for how the site might be designed. We analyzed those using sophisticated techniques and are now in the process of narrowing that down to the final framework plan. And that'll be really over the next few weeks, and then put the final documents together. But one thing that I think I'll emphasize is that this will not be a detailed master plan. We're calling it a framework plan because it'll give clear direction to the development community as we move forward. But the watchword has kind of been flexibility. Mm-hmm. I think we all recognize that markets change, technology changes, and there will be changes to this plan over time. But it sets a really, I think, thoughtful and clear direction on where we're going in the first phases.
It sounds like an extensive process. Can you give us an idea? What would you say has been your biggest single challenge, or maybe 2 or 3 of the single biggest challenges?
There are plenty of challenges in any project like this, and I think most of them, Gary, are really associated with growth. There's an understandable concern in our community about our fast-growing population and what it means to our quality of life. So we're trying to address some of those challenges at this site. And I think I will say we are growing fast, but we grew faster the previous decade, and we grew faster on a percentage basis the decade before that. So Utah's been a fast-growing state for a long time. But you think about things like traffic and air quality and water use. And so we've been planning with those challenges in mind. Let me just talk about one, and that's the transportation challenge. We know we've got a narrow area between Utah County and Salt Lake County in the Point of the Mountain. There's not a lot of space for transportation infrastructure. So to minimize the impacts on transportation, we've looked to develop this site so there's a balance of housing and jobs so people can live, work, and play on this site without having to commute. We've got a transit system that will be coming through this site to encourage people not to drive. We plan on internal circulators that will make it easy for people to get around the community, on-demand services, and generally, we think we can create what we might call a one-car community. Somebody that lives there may want a car to drive somewhere on the weekends or
Big
if they
challenge.
commute off-site, but they can get around this site within a 15-minute walk, and they can access pretty much anything on-site transportation.
Well, as we all know, the I-15 north-south corridor, particularly in the Point of the Mountain area, at certain hours during the day, morning, evening, is almost as bad as California. Perhaps not quite, but
I've lived in California. It's not nearly the same.
Not nearly.
No.
In any event, isn't it inevitable that it's going to have a dramatic impact on future traffic on just that single corridor by itself?
So this area is going to grow, and it will have an impact on transportation. The fact that our region's growing does, but there are plans in place to mitigate that, and that includes extending a transit system from Salt Lake County down into Utah County. There will be some parallel road systems that will go through, completing the Mountain View corridor, upgrading Porter Rockwell and Redwood Road. So I think we're trying to get ahead of the challenge, and as I said, minimize the impact from this site. Now, a 600-acre site isn't going to be the domino that causes the problem. It's going to be collective growth. So we've got to look at what happens regionally and not just at this site.
Indeed. I think a discussion of this nature will always lead to the point or the question of what's the cost?
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea what the total cost will be when it's complete?
You know, that's a big question, and it's one that we're interested in and working on. So I don't have a number right now. It's going to depend to a large degree on what this final plan looks like. So as we develop it, we want this to be a site that is cutting edge, that's a model of kind of sustainable and future-focused development. And there's a cost to that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the costs are reasonable and not all borne by the public. We expect there will be investors, private investors that will bring money in, that as we have developers come in, they'll raise some capital for the site. So it'll be, I think, many contributors to making this site what it needs to be. But at the end of the day, we recognize that this has to provide a return for the people of the state.
Indeed.
And again, that's financial or quality of life.
That sort of leads us to the next question that you've already answered to a certain extent. So the funding source is not all state or city or county. There are multiple sources. What about feds? Any funds coming in from U.S. government?
Yeah, we don't have them in hand, but yes, we anticipate that we will explore grants. Some of it will support the transportation system. We know that there are infrastructure dollars that are likely to come from the federal government, and this is the kind of project that they're talking about, a project that is focused on innovation, advancing economic opportunity for people, and using those funds to solve some of the challenges we have. You know, we hope that this site could be a model development that others could follow to show that we can use less energy, we can use less water, we can have less impact on air quality, et cetera.
One more question on the funding. At some point, will the state issue bonds that investors will actually purchase to help support this project? Is that one of the sources?
I think that likely will be one of the sources, that there would be some bonding. The authority has tax increment financing authority, so we could use some of the revenues generated by the private sector on this site to supplement the costs of the public infrastructure.
Alan, you mentioned water a time or two, and that is always a critical issue for any development. Without water, there's no development. Without water, the future looks pretty dim. How will you address, or what's been discussed regarding periods like now with serious droughts, where the snowpack is far less than average? What are some of those challenges that you face?
Water's a big issue, and especially now. In a previous life, I oversaw development of state water strategy. Water's very much on our minds. And as we've developed this site, we've been looking at strategies to capture natural stormwater on the site, to minimize the need for additional infrastructure, to put in landscaping that is native and uses less water, to have systems that recycle gray water, and essentially create a development that through buildings and through the land design really maximizes our water use. And we've talked to the water agencies, of course, to make sure that there's water available. They said they've been planning not just for this development, but for further growth in the region, and that they've got the water resources that are needed. Mm-hmm. Again, we hope to be a model for others that
certainly
we can. If others follow, then maybe rather than just looking at a 600-acre site, we can expand those technologies and techniques.
Sure, take advantage of that.
A broader benefit.
Indeed. Given your invitation to the public and all stakeholders to participate, have you had a great deal of pushback?
There are probably as many ideas about what ought to happen at this site as there are people expressing them. So lots of different ideas. But I've frankly been really pleased that there's a general support in the public for this idea of creating a place that has opportunities so that our kids can have world-class careers right here in Utah, not have to go elsewhere. A place that is a model of sustainability. A place that will have really interesting open spaces where people can recreate. For example, we're going to connect the Jordan River Parkway to the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and those Wasatch Foothill Trails, so people can recreate, commute to the site on trails and not get in cars. It's also going to be a place that I think will generate economic activity and revenues that go to social services and education and other needed services in our community. So we hope it's a public benefit.
Speaking of economic and public benefit, can you estimate approximately how many new jobs could be possibly created out of this project?
Yeah, we anticipate that based on the draft plans that are in place, it'll be about 30,000 jobs on the site and maybe 15,000 residents. So real job center, and these are going to be high-paying, high-tech, innovation jobs that I think will spur our broader economy.
Well, that's exciting and certainly very rewarding. But where does this labor force come from?
The labor force is, we're growing as a state. We need the jobs. We need the jobs to sustain those who are living here in our economy. So a lot of it's coming from our internal growth. Some of it's coming from those moving in. They see the quality of life here and want to be here. And so I think ensuring that we're developing the workforce at the same time we're creating jobs is important. So we're working with the education system, both public education and higher education, to have programs that'll help our young people learn the skills and the technologies and systems they'll need to be successful in this innovation economy. Absolutely.
Can you give us just an estimate? When do you see the first shovel of dirt being turned over?
A lot of this starts with the prison move. We can't do much until the inmates are moved to the new prison.
Of course. And when is that anticipated?
Yeah, the estimate is that the new prison will be completed early next year. They'll do kind of a shakedown of the new system and then move the inmates a year from now, so summer of 2022. At that point, we'll be able to start whatever demolition is needed, and probably expect the backbone infrastructure to go in 2023, and then we'll likely see some vertical development going in 2024.
And completion estimate when?
There are a lot of variables that
Indeed.
will impact that, but we would expect that this is going to be probably a 20-year build-out.
So it'll be done in phases.
It'll be done
over
phases.
An extended period of time.
That's right. So we'll start with a nice mixed-use phase that will set the standard for this development, and will be an exciting place where people can gather, nice restaurants, entertainment, retail, and really interesting jobs.
Just a quick observation. Given the 600 acres currently under study and the other 20,000 acres you said that potentially could be available, it sounds like this will be the center of growth and development and economic activity for the next 30, 40 years in the future. Is that a reasonable assumption?
I think it is, and it has been over the last 10, 15 years. I think 40% of the jobs created in Utah over the last 15 years have been in this point of the mountain region, and so more will come. Again, we think it's an opportunity to create benefits statewide and not just in this localized area.
Absolutely. It might be just a little too early to ask this question, but can you give us any idea, give us a hint as to who some of the new occupants or tenants might be?
We don't have anything set up yet, and we haven't started recruiting, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of interest out there. I've had companies that have approached us and wanted to have a presence there, industries that have wanted to have a center of activity there. And so that's all really exciting.
It is indeed. So not only are you seeing interest from throughout the country, but also internationally.
We are.
Is that the objective?
Yeah.
Is to a certain extent, all comers are perhaps welcome.
We're not going to be all things to all people.
Of course not.
And it probably makes sense for us to target certain industries so that we can create a center of gravity here that really spurs certain industries, maybe whether it's biotech or high tech or cybersecurity or something along those lines. But let me just tell you a little anecdote.
Please.
So a little over a year ago, I got a call, and there were a couple of site selectors that were coming into town. These are people that work for companies and help them identify locations that they might want to put a facility. And we spent, 45 minutes showing them the area, talking about the transportation system, the proximity of the airport, some of the things that we have in mind. And at the end, one of them was from California, one of them was from Texas. And at the end, one of them said, as you've been talking, I've been trying to think of an opportunity like this anywhere in the country, and I can't think of one. We've talked about this locally as a once-in-a-generation opportunity, or maybe one of the best opportunities in state history for economic development and improving quality of life. I thought that might be an exaggeration at first, but I don't anymore after talking to planners around the country, developers around the country, and around the world. So high expectations, high scrutiny, we're committed to doing it right.
One of the questions that the average man on the street might ask, or person on the street might ask, is, this is all well and good, and this is exciting, but is this going to impact my tax base? Am I going to be expected to pay more taxes to support an area that may be 25 or 50 or 100 miles from where I live? Any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I understand people asking it. I would say it's just the opposite. This is going to generate tax revenues that will go into the general fund of the state and provide infrastructure around the state. And the jobs and the benefits, the spin-off opportunities, I think will be certainly a net benefit for the taxpayers of Utah.
It sounds like you've given a lot of thought, consideration to the impact this kind of growth will have on the existing infrastructure, which is probably safe to say would not support this type of growth. So as part of the development, it sounds like you have to look at a whole new infrastructure, whether it's water delivery or sewers, transportation. The entire process has to be upgraded, it sounds like. Fair observation?
Yes and no. I mean, this project isn't a surprise. So those that provide our utilities, water, wastewater, et cetera, electricity, have anticipated this for some time. And so we've got a system that can support it. But on the site itself, certainly, the infrastructure is not built to accommodate what will come. That has to increase. We'll have to work over time very closely with the water providers, the providers of electricity and other energy, and make sure that we're building for the region. As I said, this is just a small part of what's happening in our broader Wasatch Front region, and so we'll work on that collaboratively to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Alan, it's almost impossible to talk about development and growth, new construction, housing, residential, without talking about affordable housing, which is growing to be a serious issue here in not only our city and county, but also throughout the state. Are you incorporating this consideration in your review and analysis?
We certainly are. I think we all recognize that one of Utah's advantages over time has been affordability. And we may be losing some of that advantage as demand for housing goes up and the supply isn't meeting that demand. So we recognize that. We've got a number of housing advocates and experts serving on our working groups and stakeholder advisory committees. Our board has specifically indicated that providing accessible housing is going to be important at this site. So this is going to be a little community, and a community has people from a range of backgrounds and income levels. We want people that work at this site in any type of job to be able to find housing at the site. So it's a consideration, it's a challenge. We anticipate that we'll be working with the developers. We'll continue working with housing advocates in the area, with the legislature as they advance housing initiatives to be part of the solution. We won't solve it all on 600 acres, but we want to be part of the solution.
Well, it sounds like it's important to you, and you're giving it proper attention. With this level of growth, considering an existing problem that we face, particularly in the greater Salt Lake area, and that's air quality, how will you address that issue? That air quality abatement is on the forefront.
I've spent most of the last 10 plus years of my life focusing on air quality as an advisor to the governor and head of the Department of Environmental Quality. And it's just vital to our economy, our health, our quality of life. I will say we've made good progress. Over about the last 15 years, we've cut per capita emissions about in half. Our air's cleaner than it's been since recording started 50 years ago. We're making progress. All of the trends show that that's going to continue, but we're not done. And I think one thing I'd say, most of the progress recently has been made with vehicles, better technologies. And very soon, it's going to be buildings that are going to be the primary source of air emissions. So making sure that our buildings emit less is a key strategy in improving our air quality. So at this site in particular, we're looking at the transportation side, looking at electric, autonomous circulators, ways to charge the vehicles and put charging infrastructure in the homes and buildings. We're looking at renewable energy on site. We're also looking at the buildings, making them more energy efficient, and looking at the latest strategies. We've got a sustainability consultant that's working with us to develop a net zero program. So this site could be ready to be net zero in terms of carbon emissions as it's developed further. So again, hope that this can be a model development that others can follow and leverage the benefits throughout our communities.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. We are running out of time. We have just a couple more minutes left, a couple more questions. Is it too early? Will, for the most part, local contractors be part of this process, or will it strictly be on a bid cost basis, which may include out-of-state contractors coming in?
We're going to go through a competitive process. We want to make sure that we have the best developers and contractors involved,
Sure.
Those that have experience in creating the kind of future-focused, smart city, sustainable communities we've talked about. But certainly we would hope that there is active Utah participation in the development of this site. I will just tell you briefly, we recognize that it's one thing to plan, it's another to build. And we've reached out through a public process to 16 developers around the country to provide input on our planning and on our proposed transactional strategy. That's been really helpful to make sure that we're not just being visionary, but also rooted in practical considerations.
Sure. Well, I guess that is an inherent problem, at least in today's environment, simply because of the labor shortage that exists. So as more projects, big projects like this come online, that even puts more pressure on the labor market. So I guess out of necessity, there will be a lot of outside labor that hopefully will come in to help with this project.
I think that's a possibility, and it'll probably be the responsibility of those developers that come in to figure out where that workforce comes from. But we hope that we can create good jobs and that we can generate the kinds of revenues that ease the burden on the taxpayer.
Sure. Well, it certainly sounds like you're headed in that direction with a lot of hard effort. One more question. If our listeners have an interest in learning more about this project, what advice do you have for them? Where can they go? Who can they contact?
Well, we've tried to be really open, have a number of social media outlets. They can go to our website, www.thepointutah.org. And on that website, we've got recordings of all of our meetings. We live stream all of our meetings. You can see a calendar so that you can go in and watch whatever we do. We put out monthly newsletters to local communities, regular posts on our Twitter account, again, The Point Utah. So welcome public participation, and look forward to more conversations as we go ahead.
Well, that's great. Alan, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate you being with us. That concludes this episode of Stringham Real Estate Edge. Today's program was brought to you by Stringham Schools, educating real estate professionals since 1989. Visit stringhamschools.com to learn more. We want to thank today's guests, and don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm Gary Barnes, and I'll see you on the next episode of Stringham Real Estate Edge.